إياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم عليك قل من الله ولم يكن
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بسيدنا ومولانا أمير المؤمنين والحمد لله رب العالمين محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد يقول الله في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال إني جائلك للناس إماما قال ومن ذرياتي قال لا ينال عهد الظالمين. صلوات On this night of the Shahada of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib, we commemorate on this night on which the silent, the Quran is Samit, descends upon the hearts of the prophets, but on the same night, the Quran and Natiq, the speaking Quran, it returns back to its Lord. And what can I say about a man like Amir al-Mu'mineen in a few minutes? A man, as the Prophet says, that if all of the oceans were ink, and all of the trees were pens, and all of the jinn and all of the human beings were writing, they would not be able to write the fadail of this man. About this night, what can I say about somebody who has this stature, who has this magnanimity, a man who even mentioning his name is worship? As the narration says, زَيَّنُوا مَجَالِسَكُمْ بِذِكْرِ عَلِيِّ ibn Abi Talib. That give your gatherings zinat with the remembrance of Ali. Why? Why the remembrance of Ali? The Prophet, he goes on, he says, وَإِنَّ ذِكْرُهُ ذِكْرِي وَذِكْرِي وَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ وَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ عِبَادَةً وَإِنَّ ذِكْرِ عَلِيٍّ عِبَادَةً. He says, remember this man. Why? Because his remembrance is my remembrance. And my remembrance is the remembrance of Allah, and the remembrance of Allah is ibadah. Therefore, the remembrance of Ali is ibadah. Words can't put into play what kind of a stature, what kind of a person that this ummah lost upon this day. On this day, not only did we lose our imam, but we lost the Prophet himself, because after all, the ayat al-Mubayla says that he was the nafs of the Prophet, he was the soul of the Prophet, that as long as Ali was alive, the Prophet was alive. And on this day, we lost him as well. And to not take too much time, the topic which I picked for this short majlis, and today is only the first part, and tomorrow I'll finish it, is what criteria do we have within the school of Ahlul Bayt to deem someone an imam? Because there are three unique criteria within our belief, within our aqidah, that deem someone an imam. You know, there's a misconception. Some people say that you people, you the Shia, you guys just believe in favoring a lineage. That your imams, they just favor a lineage. We reply without a doubt that that lineage is a pure lineage. But the reason why they are imams is not just because they're from that lineage. And the verse which I recited at the beginning of this lecture, it proves that. Because when you look within the Quran, the word imam, it comes within the Quran. And as you know, there is a wisdom towards every single thing within the Quran. And when you look at the amount of times the word Imam comes up, you find within the Quran the word Imam comes up 12 times. The word Imam comes in the Quran 12 times, and one of these occasions is from Surah Baqarah. After Ibrahim, he passed his test. After he sacrificed Ismail and Allah ransomed it. After going through what he went through with Nimrud, Allah said to Ibrahim, Ya Ibrahim, Qala inni ja'iluka lin-nasi imaman. That, oh Ibrahim, I'm making you an imam for all of mankind. Now, but look at the difference between Ibrahim and Amir al-Mu'mineen. This ayah, it says that Ibrahim was an imam for all of mankind. The difference between the level of imamat of Ibrahim, the Panjitan, they're all mushtaq, they're all derived from the names of Allah. That Allah himself is Mahmud, so one of them is Muhammad. Allah is Fatirus Samawati wal Ard, so one of them is Fatima. Allah is Muhsin, so one of them is Hassan. Allah is Qadimul Ihsan, so one of them is Hussain. And Allah is Ala, so one of them is Ali. One of them is Ali, and indeed this is one of the du'as. You know, when Hazrat Adam, he was expelled from paradise, it wasn't Jannat as in what we think of Jannat being what we will give in afterwards. He was expelled from paradise, and you know how he asked for forgiveness? He made this dua which I just recited. On this night, one of the potential nights of Qadr, if you have any hajat, recite this dua at first, which is Allahumma inni as'aluka bihaqqi Muhammad wa anta al-Mahmud wa bihaqqi Ali wa anta al-Ala wa bihaqqi Fatima wa anta Fatirus samawati wal ard wa bihaqqi al-Hasan wa anta al-Muhsin wa bihaqqi al-Hussain wa anta Qadimul Ihsan. Because the first dua in the history of mankind started with this. The first dua in the history of mankind started with the names of the Panjitan. And I won't expand too long the other criteria of imamat and quickly finishing it up. Now when you look within the Quran, is there any proof for the designation of imama? Is there any proof for the designation of Amir al-Mu'mineen? When we say the kalma and we say Aliyun Waliullah, is there any proof for saying Aliyun Waliullah? When you look within the Quran, in Surah Taha, after Musa, he met with Pharaoh and he brought forth his miracle. Because as you know, Pharaoh, he had the magicians. And the magicians, they had their asa which turned into a snake. But they were just using magic. They were just using trickery because they had mercury and it looked like it was moving. But the asa of Hazrat Musa, it actually turned into a snake and it ate their sticks. At that point, what happened? At that point, the magicians, they fell into prostration and they said what? They said, Amanna bi Rabbi Harun wa Musa. An important point comes in, is that why do they say Amanna bi Rabbi Harun wa Musa? Why not just say, I believe in Allah and leave it at that? Or I believe in Allah and His Prophet and leave it at that? Because they could have said, Amanna bi Rabbi. Or they could have said, Amanna bi Rabbi Musa. Why Amanna bi Rabbi Harun wa Musa? They wanted to show within the Quran that if you want a kalma which completes your iman, not only do you have to acknowledge Allah and you have to acknowledge His Prophet, but you have to acknowledge the successor to that Prophet. Because after all, who was Hazrat Harun? He was the successor of Musa. Amanna bi Rabbi Harun wa Musa. And this is why time and time again within the Quran and within the history that the successor has been made clear. You know, you read in the story of Nabi Sulaiman. When you read in that story, you know that Nabi Sulaiman, he controlled half the earth and the Queen of Sheba had the other half of the earth. What does the Quran say? The Quran says Nabi Sulaiman asked that who can get me the throne of the Queen of Sheba from the other side of the earth? Now what reply came in? One of the jinn, he replied that I can get you that throne by the time you stand up. But at that moment there was one, as the Quran says, there was a man who had some knowledge of the book. And as we know, it was Asif bin Barki, the successor of Nabi Sulaiman. He said that I can get you the throne by the time you blink your eye. You know, they asked our fifth Imam, Imam al-Baqir, they asked our fifth Imam that Nabi Sulaiman, he had control of the wind, he could speak to the animals, he had control of the jinn. Could he not bring the throne by himself? Why did he have to ask Asif bin Barqiyah to bring the throne? Our fifth Imam, look at his reply. He replies by saying that yes, of course, Nabi Sulaiman could have brought the throne on his own, but he wanted to show all of mankind who his successor was. When you look at Amir al-Mu'mineen lifting the door of Khaybar, the Prophet had the strength to lift the door of Khaybar. When you see Amir al-Mu'mineen fighting Amr bin Abdul Wid, when you see him fighting Marhab, the Prophet could have done all these things, but the reason he let Amir al-Mu'mineen have these fazail is so all of mankind will know who the successor of the Prophet. And then they kept asking the Imam al-Baqir, they said that the Quran says that he had some knowledge of the book. How much knowledge of the book did he have? Imam al-Baqir replies that he had 1 out of the 73 pieces of knowledge. 1 out of 73. Then the man, he kept asking Imam al-Baqir, he said, how much did this Prophet have? And how much did this Prophet have? The Imam, he kept answering, and then he got towards the next point, and he said, oh man, know that my grandfather, the Prophet, and Amir al-Mu'mineen had 72 out of the 73 pieces of knowledge. That when you see Asif bin Barqiyah bringing the throne of the Queen of Sheba halfway from around the earth, just because he is the successor of Sulaiman, know that the successor of the greatest of prophets can do a lot more than that. The knowledge of Allah is uncomparable. It is uncomparable from what Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Prophet had, because the hadith says, Ya Ali, the Prophet is speaking, he says, Ya Ali, ma arafa Allah illa ana wa ant, that nobody has understood Allah except for you and me. Wa ma arafani illa Allah wa ant, and nobody has understood me except for Allah and you. And then he says, وَمَا أَرَفَقَا إِلَّا أَنَا وَأَنْتَ, and nobody has understood you, O Ali, except for me and Allah. That Ali is that one who cannot be understood, because he existed before this concept of understanding and aql existed. As the Shair says, कि किस तरह भला रब्बे उला अक़ल में आए, किस तरह भला रब्बे उला अक़ल में आए, मुमकिन ही नहीं नूर खुदा अक़ल में आए, और अक़ल की मीज़ान पे हैदर को ना तोलो, जो अक़ल से पहले हो वो क्या अक़ल में And I won't take too much time, as I said earlier, but amongst the greatest acts that you can do even on this night of Qadr is listening to the fazail of Amir al-Mu'mineen, because it's written within our narrations that the one who listens to one fazail of the Imam, the sins of his ears are forgiven. The one who reads one fazail of the Imam, the sins of his eyes are forgiven. And the one who recites the fazail of the Imam, the sins of his tongue are forgiven. So amongst this night of forgiveness, these fazail of Amir al-Mu'mineen are amongst the amals of this night. Now, as the narration which I was pointing to said, that none understands Allah except for Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Prophet. And it goes to show that if you want to truly understand Allah, then you reach them through the wasila of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the Ahlul Bayt of the Prophet and Amir al-Mu'mineen. Because through them you gain understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you know, some people say that you exaggerate Ali and you say that he's God. But I remember the words of the poet, that the greatness of Ali is not from, it's not that we think Ali is God, but it's rather we think that how great must our God be if Ali is his creation. Look at the words, look at the thinking, that how great must Allah be for him to have the ability to create someone like Ali. And on this night of the 21st of Ramzan, that man who had all of these virtues, and despite having these virtues, someone had it in him to strike his head and kill him. But I tell you, when we hear these masayib, the masayib of the 21st of Ramzan, these aren't masayib for Amir al-Mu'mineen. Because these are the masayib for his family, these are the masayib for his followers, for his lovers. Because for Imam, that was a day of victory, because he said, Fusto bi Rabbil Kaaba. But the real masayib of the Imam, they were in Medina. When the Imam was in Medina, they came towards the door of the Imam. They come and they light fire to the door of that house which the Prophet used to come and say salam to. Fatima az-Zahra, she goes towards that door. She goes to open the door. The man says, I'm going to break down the door. She replies by saying, even if I'm in here, the man says, I don't care. He pushes the door. Fatima az-Zahra was in between the door and the wall. She calls out, oh Fizza, help me. These are when the fazail of Amir al-Mu'mineen begin. These are when they begin. They say that the Imam, he would tell everyone to have sabr. But then this time came when he was giving ghusl to Fatima az-Zahra. The Imam, he backed off and he started crying. They asked the Imam, oh Imam, what happened? He said, my hands went across the broken rib of Zahra. The Imam, he began to cry. The Imam, he begins to cry. Time passes on, time goes on. Imam Hussain, Imam Hussain, Bibi Zainab, Bibi Kulsum, they continue until the night of the 19th came. They all knew that on that night there was something different. There was something different. The narrations say that the Imam, he was either in the house of Bibi Kulsum or in the house of Bibi Zainab. He was breaking his iftar and he had bread. And they wanted to bring more in front of him. They brought milk and they brought salt. The Imam, he stops them at that moment. He says, when have you known your father to eat more than one thing? They wanted to take the milk away. But he says, no, leave the smell. Take it away, leave the salt. They wanted to take the salt away, but he says, leave the salt. That day, the Imam, he broke his fast by eating bread and salt. The night came, the Imam, he was sitting there praying to Allah, and then he says, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. You remember in Karbala when Imam Hussain was sleeping, and he woke up and he says, Inna ilayhi wa inna ilayhi raji'un 3 times, and Hazrat Ali Akbar came towards his side, and he says, oh father, what happened? And the Imam replied, oh Ali Akbar, the time has come for me to go. In the same way in Kufa, the Imam said, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. All his children, they come around them. The Imam, he looks at them and he says that tonight is the night. Tonight is the night. The Imam, he leaves from Masjid Kufa, and may Allah grant you the ziyarah of Masjid Kufa. The Imam, he walks out the door and he's walking, and at that moment the ducks, they start screaming and coming in front of the Imam. The servant, he tries to stop them from yelling. The Imam replies, let them yell, because this is the last time I'm leaving. This is the last time I'm leaving this house. What will the orphans of Kufa do? What will this ummah do when their father is leaving them? The Imam, he walks towards the masjid. He goes towards Masjid Kufa. He sees that Maloon sleeping on his stomach. The Imam, he wakes him up. He goes towards praying. The Imam, he goes towards ruku. Subhana Rabbi al-Azim wa bihamdih. The Imam, he stands up. He goes towards sajda. He does the first sajda. Then the Imam, he goes towards the second sajda. And the Muljim, he runs. He strikes the hands of the Imam. Bismillah wa billah wa fi sabilillah. Fusto bi Rabbil Kaaba. The voice comes from the voice of the Imam. The Imam, he finishes. He rolls into the lap of Imam al-Hassan. His beard and his face are covered in blood. He looks at Imam al-Hassan. He sees that one tear is dripping from the eyes of Imam al-Hassan onto him. The Imam says, "Oh Hassan, why are you crying? The Prophet has come to me. Fatima al-Zahra has come to see me." Imam al-Hassan, they take Amir al-Mu'mineen back towards his house. As they're going back towards his house, the Imam, he can barely walk, but he says, "Oh, let me on my feet." The Imam al-Hassan asks, "Why let me on my feet?" The Imam replies, I don't want Zainab to see me like this." I say, "Oh Imam, if you can't bear to see Zainab seeing you in pain, how would you have seen what happened on the day of Ashura when she was running from tent to tent, when she was taking care of Sakina, when she was running after the children, when they were poking the body of Zainab with their spear? How could you have bear to see her in Kufa when all of them were on one rope? On the same rope was Zainab, on the same rope was Kulthum, on the same rope was Sakina." على لعنة الله للقوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين أي منقلب ينقلبون معكم.